So for this assignment, what you're ultimately going to be making is a circuit that when you run your simulation, these three lights, red, yellow, and green, like traffic lights, slowly fade in and out, and then take turns fading in and out and in and out repeatedly. So I'm going to go into Tinkercad and start a new project. Okay, I have this one started with a board, an Arduino board. So you're going to want to bring these two pieces in. So first we're going to need to power our breadboard using our Arduino. So this 5-volt, I zoom in here. So from 5-volt, we're going to put onto our red positive rail and ground to our black negative rail. So I'm going to grab the 5-volt first and connect it. It doesn't really matter where on the rail. I'm going to make it red. And one cool thing to make it clean up your wires a little bit so they're not all crisscrossing over your board is if you double click on that wire, it creates a little dot and you can like position the wire to go around so you're not covering up ports and things like that. So there is our power. So now I'm going to take our ground and maybe I'm going to move this. There we go. And go to our negative and make that black. And again, I'm going to clean up my wires. There we go, and they're not even crossing over each other at all. Just makes it a little easier. So what we're going to do first is learn how to control three LEDs. So I'm going to bring in my first one here and plop it in, and a resistor. And my resistor is going to go from that negative end, the short end, to our negative end of the board. So I can zoom in here so you guys can see. So our resistor, we're going to also want to modify. We're going to make it 220 and just regular ohms so that it can power our LED. And then our LED is going to go from, I'm trying to be zoomed in here enough so that you guys can see. So from our positive leg, the anode, to the 13 port here. And I'm just going to make this red because the LED is red right now. So if we did start simulation, it turns on and off, which is totally good. So there is that one. And if we were to look at our code, we can see it sets the built-in LED, which is connected to 13, to high. It waits a second, and then it goes to low and waits a second and keeps repeating. So we need to bring in our other two LEDs. So I'm going to plop these in, set up the resistors and the wiring. So I'm going to make this one yellow and the next one green. So just like traffic lights, putting our resistors in. 220. And then wire, we'll go to 12 and 11. And I'm going to make these wires match the color of the LED so I know exactly what's going on. All right, so if we were to run this, obviously our red is the only one that's still going to be blinking because our code only has a built-in LED set up to do its thing. So we need to get the other ones going and to make them space out so they're not all blinking at the same time. We're going to have them take turns. So we can use this bit of code here again, but we're going to, instead of having it wait 1 second, we're going to actually create a variable so we can just keep reusing that variable over and over again instead of having to type it in. So if you go to variables, we're going to create a variable and we're going to call it animation speed. So typically when you're creating names and stuff, whenever you have more than one word, the first letter of that next word is capitalized, it just makes it easier to read. You could capitalize the first letter of all of them, but this is kind of just standard of how you do that. So at the beginning, we're going to set our animation speed. We're going to do 400. So if you wanted to change the animation speed of how fast it blinks, instead of having to change all of these numbers, which we're going to have a lot once we get this all set up, you'd only have to change it right here. And because this variable is going to plop in to that wait block, it would automatically change it. So like right now, if we run the code, it is, oh, I have it on seconds. It's going to stay on for 400 seconds. That's a little long. We want milliseconds. There we go. So now it should turn on and off pretty quickly. So if I were to change this number to even 800 and run it again, now it blinks a little slower. So instead of having to change those numbers every time, I can just change it in that one variable block. So I'm going to keep it at 400. So we need to now set up our other LEDs. So we're going to bring output and set pin. We have pin 12 to high to turn it on. And then we're going to wait with our animation speed milliseconds. And actually, if I drag this down, I can duplicate it and set it to low. And then again, now that I have these 4 blocks, I can duplicate that and set number 11, because that's our green. And I can just connect them all. So now if we run our code, there they go. They blink one at a time going through our stoplight here. So that's how you make multiple LEDs blink one at a time, which that's not what we're going for. We want them to fade. So next I'm going to show you, I'm actually just going to do it off to the side here, how to do fading. And then what you guys are going to have to do is figure out how to combine these two things together. So I'm going to close my code and bring in another breadboard and another Arduino. And again, I'm going to power my rails. This one's not going to have as much going on, so I'm just going to leave my wires going through there. Oops, of course. I'm going to move this closer to so when I zoom in. All right, so for fading, you're going to have to use specific pins down here. So only the pins that have this little wavy line will allow you to do the fading. So you are going to have to move some of the pins around from that previous one we just did so that they are using just these fading lines. So let's get an LED. I'm going to plop that in and a resistor. So again, going from the cathode to the negative rail, we want 220 ohms. And then we just need to connect our anode, our positive, to our pins. I'm going to use pin 9 because that has that little squiggly line. All right. So next we got to do our code. So this preset code here is not going to help us at all. We're just going to trash it. And I'm going to actually move this over. So we are going to do something or using this count block. So this will allow us to increase the brightness by whatever we want. So we're going to have it first count up by 5. We're going to go from 0 to 255, and you guys will see what this does in a minute here. So for I, so instead of I, we're going to give it a better name. We're going to call it brightness, because this is going to control the brightness, and this is a variable that was just created. So now if I go to variables, I see brightness there, which we're going to need. So next we're going to go to output and set pin whatever to a number. So instead of the to high or low, we want to use this one that has only those squiggly line pins in it. So we're going to set pin 9 to, instead of 0, we're going to put brightness. So this yellow block is like a loop. So it's going to go from 0 to 255 and then move on to the next thing. So once it completes that, it'll move on. So, and then after it gets all the way bright at 255, we're going to want it to wait. Let's do 30 milliseconds. And then I'm actually going to duplicate this, makes it a little faster, put it underneath. Instead of going up, we want it to go down so it slowly gets brighter, and then it'll slowly get dimmer. And this will go from 255 brightness down to 0. Set pin to brightness, so it's going to just follow that yellow loop and wait 30 seconds before, or 30 milliseconds before it moves on. So if we start simulation, you can see it get brighter and dimmer. And you could play around with those numbers and see, like, if we did 20, that's going to change some stuff here. It gets brighter and dimmer a lot quicker. So maybe 10 maybe would look nice. You can play around with that, see what different numbers change and do. All right, so now that you know how to control 3 different lights and how to fade one light, you're going to combine that to make all 3 of these fade one at a time. So like if I go back to that example here. So with this example, what you are going to try and do on your own is make each LED here, the red, yellow, and green, slowly fade on and off one at a time. So they all should be doing it at their own turn, and it should repeat. So with that, you are going to have to play around a little bit, figure out how to get the code to work, but using what I showed you in these 2 separate little demos, you should be able to figure it out. Just try things. In the simulator, you can't break it. You can always undo and redo if you mess something up, but once you get your board set up, it'll just be playing around with the code. You can look at your code too to see what to do and kind of try different things. You can pull back up this video on my example code to see how to try different things. What I'm going to want to see is you running the simulation in a video. So just make sure during the simulation that I can see your code at some point, and you can zoom in and out on your code too. So if you're too close, you can zoom out and then show me that your lights are blinking. Just make sure you stay on the code long enough so that I can actually see it and see what you did there. So a short little video just of your board running with the LEDs and showing me your code.